friends, it's Anna. Welcome to my channel. I am so excited for today's video because I'm going to be taking you guys on a full tour of my reading journal. We're going to be talking about lots of books, which spreads were my favorite, and my final reading stats for 2023, which I made a few really cool end of year spreads for. So grab some tea, get cozy, and let's jump into this journal. First, we have my name page, which I decorated with a few different washi tapes. And then we have my cover pages for the journal. I thought this quote from Stephen King was perfect to put in the beginning, and I wanted to create a drawing that would go along with the imagery of the quote. So we have a book with some gold swirls, which I thought could represent magic coming off the pages. On the right side, you can see I have some torn out book pages. These are from an old Harry Potter book, and I use them quite a bit throughout the journal. So anytime you see any book pages, those are from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Next, we have my index, which I don't use that often because I pretty much know where everything in the journal is. But I think this will be handy in years to come when I'm looking back on this. Next, we had my tracker and goal spreads. When setting this up, my loose goal was to read 42 books in the year, and I actually ended up surpassing that. I read 53 books in 2023, and it's so satisfying now to see all the boxes colored in. I didn't do as well when it came to my specific reading goals. At the beginning of the year, I had 4 specific goals that I wanted to kind of guide my reading. The first was to finish the open series that I considered myself actively in the middle of reading. I'm in the middle of more series than this, but these were the ones I wanted to focus on, and I didn't do that great of a job. I didn't read any from the Outlander series, only one from the Wayfarer series, which is a cozy sci-fi, and then I am currently in the middle of A Wise Man's Fear, which is the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicles, so I gave myself a little half credit for that one. I did complete reading all of Jane Austen's novels this year, and then also 4 additional classics, so I did really well on my classic related goals. I also had a goal to read 2 history books. I did read one, The Almanac of World History, which sounds like the driest and most boring book of all time, but it was actually quite good. I really enjoy National Geographic's history content. Here we have my reading log, so this is just a list of all the books I read in the year and a few details about each one. So we have the number, the book title, the day I started it and finished it, number of pages in the book, and my rating. I actually started this journal in June, so that's why I only have the start dates for books starting in June. And since I didn't know I was going to read as many books as I did, I kind of ran out of space here on the right side, but I ended up being able to fit them all. And my next spread is one of my favorites. This is my book bracket. It's kind of a tournament of all the books I read in 2023 to help me figure out what my favorite book of the year was. I chose my favorite book for each month and listed those up here, and then had the books go head to head to pick my top 6 and then top 3, and then finally my favorite book of the entire year. I'm not gonna go over all the books on this list because that would take quite a while, but I did think it would be fun to show you guys my top 3 books of 2023. Really, every single book on this list is pretty good, but these were definitely my favorites, and I would highly recommend all these titles. First, we have Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. He He's the author of All the Light We Cannot See, and this was a fascinating book because it's historical fiction, contemporary fiction, and sci-fi all in one story. And then next we have Bluebird by Sharon Cameron. This is a historical fiction set during World War II/the Cold War. I still think about this book all the time, and I ended up picking this one as my top book of the whole year. And then my last of the top 3 was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I have this beautiful version from Chiltern Classics, but this is such an underrated Jane Austen novel. I read it for the first time this year and absolutely loved it. It might have my favorite Jane Austen protagonist, so I would highly recommend this one along with these other 2. I would also love to hear what your top book of 2023 was. I love getting book recommendations from you guys, and I assume if it was your top book of the year, it's probably pretty good, so please do let me know. My last 2 spreads of the annual setup were one for my book club. This is just so I could see all the books that I read together with my friends in our book club this year. And then I also made myself a rating guide to try to help with assigning star ratings to each of the books, which I still really struggle with. Now we're getting into the monthly and individual book spreads. So I kind of follow the same format for most months. We have a cover page that is just for vibes and decoration. I kind of try to match the feel of the books I read that month. I usually get these pictures from Pinterest and then go with lots of washi tapes and stickers and stamps. On the right side, we have the covers of the books I read and then a few stats about those books. I try to make a spread for every book I read each month. This is where I can just write my thoughts about the book and reviews. I also included if I had any favorite quotes from the book and printed out any images that reminded me of the story. If you care about spoilers, I wouldn't look too closely about what I wrote for each book because I was just writing anything that came to mind and I definitely wasn't trying to be spoiler-free on these pages. I think August might have one of my favorite monthly cover setups. I love the floral vintage aesthetic of this one. I read 7 books in August, and you'll see I kind of adjust the amount of space I use for each book depending on how much I have to say about it. And this is a special little collection I made for my screen time to reading challenge, where I swapped my screen time for reading time for a week. I did make a video of myself doing that. That was my first ever reading vlog, and I had so much fun doing that, and I'm really proud of how the video turned out, so definitely check that out if you want to hear my thoughts on any of these books. I still need to journal about Things Fall Apart. I was meaning to do a little more research and critical thinking into this book because it is a heavier one, but never ended up doing that. So I still need to fill this out to complete my 2023 spreads. Here we have my fall TBR, which I did pretty well with. I think I ended up reading 9 of 15 of these books. I've gotten a few questions about how I paste in all the book covers and pictures, and I have an updated answer for y'all, so I thought I'd mention. I used to use this plain Elmer's glue stick, which works okay, but also a lot of the pictures you can see kind of start peeling off after a while. So I recently got this glue tape and was using that for my end of year setups, and it worked a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix some of these that are half peeling off. I will link this glue tape and also any supplies I used in the journal, any washi tape sets I pulled from, stickers, stamps, all that fun stuff in case you're curious. Moving into September, you can see I started going for more of a fall vibe to match the season. I just read 4 books in September and I was a little short on time, so I decided to put all the books on these 2 pages. And even though I didn't go as much into detail with some of the decorations in these spread, I still really love how these 4 turned out. Moving into October, I really wanted to create a Halloween dark academia feel for these spreads, especially since of the 7 books I read in October, 5 of these were on my fall TBR and definitely had a very autumnal, spooky season feel to them. So I tried to maintain that with the individual book spreads as well. You also might notice that some of my ratings are a little inconsistent. I think when I made my setup video for October, I initially rated Northanger Abbey 4 stars, but I went back and added the 5th star because after thinking on it, I really thought this book deserved all 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. So you can kind of see a few occasions throughout the journal where ratings may differ depending on where the book is referenced. And I decided to not be too worried about making the ratings match up because I think that's a really good representation of my actual reading experience. Sometimes your ratings change the further removed you are from the book. Here's a little mini November and December TBR when I was trying to figure out what books to prioritize at the end of the year. I'm never too strict with myself when I make TBRs because I never want to feel forced into reading something, but even though I never stick to them that well, I still find it so much fun to make a list of books I want to read, and especially satisfying when I do get to check off some of the books. And then in November, I only read 2 books, and that was Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So I decided to kind of just keep all the book spreads and cover page on these same 2 pages. Since I only read 2 books, I didn't want to make all the stats like normal. I also thought I would just fully commit to the aesthetic of these books for decorating these 2 spreads. And now that I'm looking at it, I realize that every single picture I printed was of a dragon. There was no variety, but I guess that's a good representation because my favorite part of these books was by far the dragons. I still also need to write my thoughts on these spreads. I filmed a reading vlog when I read these 2, and after talking about them so much for that video, I just didn't want to talk about them anymore, so I need to now go back and write my thoughts. Getting into my last few reads of the year, I love how these December pages came together. They feel so Christmassy and cozy to me, which is what I was going for. My last few book spreads. The Dutch House was actually the first non-Harry Potter audiobook I've ever listened to. I know it's kind of crazy, but I just absolutely love holding physical books so much. It's hard for me to give that experience up to listen to an audiobook, but I finally started some audiobooks again that weren't Harry Potter this December, and I absolutely loved The Dutch House. It was narrated by Tom Hanks, so he did a fantastic job really bringing the character of the narrator to life. So if you're looking for a specific audiobook recommendation, I would highly encourage this one. Also, if you guys have any recommendations for books that are particularly well suited for audio, please let me know because, like I said, I'm pretty picky when it comes to giving up being able to hold the physical book, but I would like to start listening to more audiobooks. And then lastly, we have some end of year reading stats. I had so much fun combing through all the book data and looking at my reading stats, creating all these graphs. This data is so interesting to me. So I'll take you guys through some of the stats I track. First, we have my totals. So I read 53 books this year, 21,000 pages, which is crazy, and 37 authors. So this is kind of cool to compare the number of books to authors because you could see I read a lot from the same people. And then we have age group of the books. So vast majority, 42 books and 79% were adult, but I had a few of YA, new adult, and children's books. Here we have genres. This was the stat I think I was most interested in. I had the most historical fiction reads at 19. That was not surprising to me because historical fiction has definitely been my favorite genre for the past few years, but closely followed by fantasy at 16 books, and then classics at 10, which was a little surprising to me, but that's mainly because of Jane Austen, and then Christian fiction at 5. Also, if any books fit into multiple genres, I did count them for each genre I felt they fit into, so this does add up to more than 53 books. And then 3 sci-fi, mystery, and nonfiction, 2 general fiction and magical realism, and then 1 dystopian. Here we have the number of books that were a reread, and then new books that I was reading for the first time. I was very interested in this stat because I think I have a bit of a problem of rereading too many books. I definitely have my comfort books that I tend to pick up when I don't know what to read next, which would be fine, but I also have the problem of wanting to read so many books and not having enough time, so I'm trying to cut down on my rereading a little bit, and I'm happy this at least wasn't a bigger number. Here we have format, so 10 audiobooks and 44 physical books. 7 of the audio were Harry Potter, which I reread every year, speaking of rereading books, but this year I listened to them all on audio. And then we have where I got the books. Vast majority were books I owned at 43 or 80%, but I got a few from the library and a few from the Libby app, which I just discovered in December, but I really want to start utilizing more next year. And then the last stat I have is ratings. So I had 14 5-star books, 24 star books, 12 3-star, 4 2-star, and only 1 1-star. So I think that's pretty good. And then my last few pages, I also thought it'd be fun to look at some stats month by month. So we have the number of books and number of pages I read each month. I thought it was really fun to compare these two. They parallel each other pretty well, which is what you would expect, but there's a few differences. Like, for example, I read 7 books in October and only 6 in December, and yet I read more pages in December than October, so I just thought seeing little things like that would be interesting. And then I have my average rating for each month, so I could kind of see which were my most successful reading months. Here on the side, I did averages for all of those. So the average number of books I read per month was 4.6, an average of 1,800 pages per month, and then my overall average rating of all the books I read was 3.96, which is really good, basically 4 stars, so I'm pretty happy with that. I wanted to do a spread to honor all my best reads of the year. So these are my 5-star reads. I didn't include any rereads because I think all 14 of the books I reread were also 5 stars. That's probably why I was rereading them. But these are my new finds that I rated 5 stars. And then since I had some extra space, I also wanted to include my honorable mentions. So these are books that were 4.5. Also all amazing stories. I would definitely recommend any title on this page. And that's it for my 2023 reading journal. I had so much fun taking you guys through all these pages, and I hope maybe you got some book recommendations or ideas for your own journal. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video, but until then, happy reading.